Hello, everyone. I wonder if you have been to Rome in Italy. I'm sure a number of you have been yourselves. I am quite keen to go back to Rome one day, as the first time we traveled there, it was far too short of a visit to see everything. There's so much that we only had about 36 jet-lagged hours or so. Perhaps you have been more lucky, but if I am ever to return, there is a painting that I really want to see. Completed in the year 1600, it's The Calling of St. Matthew by Caravaggio. I'd like to share with you a portion of that painting. In the right here, you can see Jesus, who's very humbly dressed, and in the full image, he's barefoot. And he's pointing over here at this table of tax collectors. And at this table of tax collectors, all very finely dressed, there's Matthew, who is pointing to himself in the expression of surprise on his face as he says, "Who, me?" Sort of shock and awe as he sits there with all of his wealth. And we know from the passage that Jesus is saying, "Follow me." So let's read from that passage. It's from Matthew chapter 9. As Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. "Follow me," he told him, and Matthew got up and followed him. While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus said, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but those who are ill. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." And this is the imagined context in which that would have happened. A very humble Jesus calling to the wealthily dressed Matthew and saying, "Come, follow me." Now consider the reputation of tax collectors like Matthew, and you will understand the situation a bit better. Matthew worked as an Israelite for a Roman oppressor and occupier. They imposed taxes on the Jewish people. It was Matthew's job to go around on their behalf and collect for Rome so that he would have been generally despised by being a traitor. Worse still, tax collectors created vast personal wealth for themselves by demanding payment in excess of what Rome asked for and pocketing the difference. Zacchaeus is a good example of this, and it's almost certain that Matthew would have behaved in a similar fashion. After Zacchaeus came to faith, he felt compelled to give back all that he had stolen. So not only was Matthew a traitor to his people, but also he was a thief who enriched himself from the weak. This sounds like pretty scummy behavior to me. And yet Jesus knew everything about Matthew, not just his reputation, but the darker things inside his heart, even darker than his actions. And yet Jesus calls to him to follow. After Matthew responds by getting up and following, Jesus is welcomed at his house for a meal, joined further by other tax collectors and sinners. The Pharisees couldn't stand it, and they thought of it as an absolute scandal. Jesus responds by quoting Hosea to them. He says, "I desire mercy, not sacrifice," a passage the Pharisees would have known very well. He frames it by confirming it's those very sinners that he has come to call. He says, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but those who are ill, those who are unwell. And he's talking about the heart, not physical conditions. Thankfully, we serve a Lord who is our ultimate healer for our heart because of our most gravest and most serious illness, and that's our own sin. Our salvation then is freedom from bondage, but also the ability to walk again after being born into blindness and paralysis. Much like many of those who Jesus healed previously, born into a life of paralysis and unable to cure themselves, Jesus reaches down and cures. So think back to a moment about that masterpiece of a painting from Caravaggio about the surprised look on Jesus's face. I'll just put it back up there for a second. Think about this masterpiece. I'd like for you to consider a different image, a much more dapper image here. This is also meant to be Matthew looking surprised and amazed that he was being called. You might be a bit confused, so please let me explain. This is a still from a video from Summer Buzz TV that we did for our holiday club, in which I portrayed Matthew as telling the gospel through the course of a week as a reporter instead of a tax collector. After reporting through the amazing miracles Jesus did all week, it's on Wednesday that we recount this passage that we are looking at today, where Jesus calls Matthew, and he's left nearly speechless and really surprised that Jesus would want to spend time with a sinner like him. Matthew admits he's a sinner and that he lives a dodgy lifestyle, but he shared how wonderful it was that Jesus calls him anyway. And you know what? As I was delivering those lines, the script as Matthew, I was struck by how similar I was feeling in my own heart. As Kenny, but a bit like Matthew, I'm often left feeling dumbfounded why Jesus would call me, why he would save me, why I've been given his love. I know that Romans 5:8 says that God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And you know, it's not because of what I bring to the relationship. It's not for any skill or asset that I have, but in fact, it's actually despite of who I am, Jesus calls me. When I was recording that video with Emily and Helen, I knew that that feeling would strike something in me this summer. And I've been feeling left with a bit of awe and wonder. Awe and wonder because of gratitude, but also lots of surprise in being reminded that Jesus would call me and wish to share a table with me. And this isn't a display of personal degradation, but rather I know how little I can offer a Savior who gave his life for me so that I could follow and experience his full grace and love. It's in the busyness and the complexities of life that we can often forget that feeling that we once felt ourselves of awe and wonder in that simple fact that Jesus once called us to follow him despite ourselves. So we are each called in the midst of our sinfulness and hopelessness. Hopefully this has given you a small reminder, whether through the reaction of Caravaggio depicting Matthew in that masterpiece, or from Matthew, the silly reporter, how incredible it feels to be called and loved by God. It's pretty amazing that Jesus still calls out to and still spends time with you and me, tax collectors and sinners. So for that, to God be the glory. And thanks for watching.